Good afternoon. We're here in session with the Budget Task Force. This is the Budget Challenges and New Revenue Committee, or subgroup, I should say, and we are being recorded if you're joining us. Right now, we are just going through the, we're going to start going through a list of suggestions for the public forum that we're holding on July 24th, 2023, which will be held at 7 p.m. at the Millennium School. This will be a hybrid format, so you will be able to join online too, but we're just going to head into our discussion here. All right, I'm going to bring up the page to share it. Here we go. All right, so Shayna, Kristen sent out this sort of draft list for the public forum we're holding on July 24th. So we were just taking a look at this before we had a quorum. Basically, she wrote down all the materials to bring. Erica had suggested writing the audience suggestions on screen so people at home can actually see them as well. Which I thought was a great idea.
Yeah, Shanna, you've been to the school committee meetings, right? I mean,
yeah, some of them.
Yeah, there's that nice big, all of them? Really?
No, some of them.
Some
No,
of them.
not all of them.
Okay, so there's that nice big screen that is right there. So it'd be easy for someone. So we might need to get, if we're talking about materials to bring, we might need a note taker, right? So you might want to add that also, Dan. It's not materials, but it's under the to bring category.
Bring a note taker, okay.
Yeah, bring a note taker so that someone could then, if we have ideas from the audience or if we are, brainstorming ourselves, then we can have, instead of the easels, I'm thinking that we have it up on the screen, because that way people who are logging in hybrid would be able to see as well.
I assume we'll want to assign responsibilities. I'll probably be one of the Budget Task Force members that's up there, just so we're all running the meeting. But yeah, I'm actually gonna write that down, assign ahead of time who's doing what.
For what?
For basically during the meeting. I think we need to organize that.
Well, yeah, for sure.
There will be a presentation. I don't know if we want to divvy it up or have one person do it all or what's going on there. So
yeah, and I think it's probably, as a minimum, I would think that each subcommittee is going to be reporting on what was going on there.
Yeah.
So I would think that at least we would have two presenters.
Great. So on the invite list, Kristen wrote down the first five, and then we came up with having a select board announcement. They have one meeting in between now and this public forum. The school online bulletins, the school weekly emails, League of Women Voters can send out an announcement, and WCAT can help promote as well. I think we doubled her list.
Right.
And by we, I mean Erica did.
That would be me. So I don't know, Shayna, if you have any other ideas for how we might get the word out. So on this invite category, it's really about how to get the word out.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've tackled most of the ones there. Val obviously has her Facebook page to market, and maybe there's some of the, I don't know if any of the selectmen or select board do.
Right.
But that's a good, also, I could go ahead and post it in my, all of us could post it in some of the, we'll figure out that part, because obviously social media is a big piece of it, but I don't have anything immediate to add there.
But that's actually a good add, is just to say member social media. We can,
We've got all like the Westford groups and stuff that drive a lot of people's behaviors.
Yeah, that's true.
That's good.
So that's a good one. So that would be all. I just put names next to all of them. So Dan, I figured you would handle, you and Kristen would handle the town manager newsletter. Chris can handle all the school, the bulletin and the emails and the newsletters. I can get to the League of Women Voters. Tom would do the SB announcement. And all of us would be responsible for posting into our own social media.
Sounds good. All right, now we're getting into the agenda. I'm gonna tab down so we can see it on one screen here. So welcome and intros. I don't know if Tom or Kristen will do the intro, but I'm guessing Tom, because it's a select board task force.
Great.
And he'll review the charge of the committee, which the select board approved. And then, yeah, we'll have to see what the other members want to do with website and all that. I did speak with Kristen. We're going to start pulling together sort of the report outline, I think, with like the new budget challenges and the like something on the levy limit, why that's an issue and all that. So we'll be doing that this week and next week.
Wait, you're filling in the outline we have? Is that what you're saying? Putting
Yeah,
the
we were
text
gonna,
in?
basically we had this already in the outline, so we're just gonna start to fill in the information on slides and we'll get that out. I think that's fine. We can handle that.
Yeah, that would be
Unless
Yeah,
they
there's
have
no
some
reason-
other idea. Yeah,
great. There's no reason to not do it yet. First,
Right.
a lot of the upfront stuff. I can even start, well, I want to get that tool working, but I can even start writing some of the methodology stuff.
okay. And we also had your Gantt chart, which is great, with the next steps for the project. So we can just take that right up. I think we have a lot of information already done, but some of
Be
the
nice.
budget, yeah. So
Be nice
some
to
of the,
show that.
yeah, that'd be great. Some of the budget challenges, we of course don't have numbers yet, so we probably won't have them all in time for this first public outreach, but we can still let them know what the challenge is, even if we don't have
Right.
the absolute numbers yet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's gonna have their stuff finalized, but at least if we can overview what we've been doing.
Right. I think it would be good to have a slide or two on our approach. Like how are we going about doing this? What are we pulling together and how are we pulling it together?
Okay, slide on the approach. How are we going about this? Great.
And then also, yeah, okay, I guess you have an additional public comment, but just highlighting to them opportunities for them to engage again if they are particularly interested in costs and who isn't. Or not cost, but money, town money, taxpayer money.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the planning retreat obviously is one opportunity, and then attending any meetings, submitting through the form, online Google form.
Right.
And then the final report, I believe, is due October 2nd, which is, or yeah, 2nd, which I think is a Monday. That
Well,
was
I
our
think
target date.
if I recall, I think the charge was for us to present. I'm not sure we're required to have a final report, so I put it like, I think the following week. So
Okay.
we give ourselves a little breathing space. I mean, I think we should have a final report, but I think the charter just says we have to present by early October.
Okay. And that report's probably going to change based on new information that comes along anyways. So, I mean, we don't get all the information up front, like we don't get state aid till January. So it's might be a living report too, just moving forward up until the town meeting.
Yeah.
Great. All right, and they want to end with the website and contact info, and yeah, all kind of ties into public feedback, how they can contact us to really contribute, which is good. All right, I got a whole host of notes here, so that's great. I'll share those with Kristen later today after we have our meetings. So if there's anything else, you can feel free to, if you think of something later, you can just email both of us.
Okay. Yes, so I'm not sure what the so I'm not sure why the final report is indented. I'm not following the thinking there.
I'm not sure either. I'd have to clarify. But I'm sure there's a reason behind it. I just don't know it.
Because maybe we should just say final report slash, presentation, because the presentation, I think, is what our deliverable formally is. So,
Okay.
letting them know that there will be a presentation to the committees that care about, right? FinCom, school committee,
Right.
and select board, and public obviously can show up at those and make remarks.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we don't call it final report. We just call it deliverable or presentation or whatever.
Well, I mean, I guess it's still important for the public to know there will be public presentations that they can attend. So when I don't know if it's subordinate to additional public comment or if we're just letting them know, but I think, making them aware that that's our destination, is making those presentations is an important point.
Okay. Great. This is good. I'm glad we have this outlined together. All right. I know we don't have Tom and Chris today, but is there anything we'd like to share? Erica, do you want to show your slide so it's recorded, what you're thinking with the...
Yeah.
Stop
So,
sharing here.
so just to introduce Shana, I did start working on the tool that I've mentioned. So again, the idea of the tool is that we would be able to take all the data that we gather, both in terms of our challenges, those cost challenges that we're trying to address, as well as being able to then also model the possible revenue sources that you're working on diligently with Tom, and then being able to pull them into a tool that would allow us to kind of understand the type of budget gap that we're trying to deal with, right? How well are those revenues likely to deal with the gap? How big might we, what would we do if the gap is too large? So I've mentioned before that what I'm proposing is that we do a Monte Carlo simulation, which is really taking randomly generated outcomes and I'll show you the chart. So this is what we would do, or I'm proposing that we do. Everyone coming up with, so for the challenges, I think we already have established that we have, a likely minimum cost associated with each particular challenge, the likely cost, additional cost associated with our challenges, and then the maximum cost associated with each challenge. So whether that's budget, labor negotiations or the new contracts for trash, et cetera, we'll have a range for each of those where we'll have minimum, most likely, and maximum. And what I have here is just showing that on a curve where we're saying, okay, the minimum cost, CML, is cost most likely, and this is the cost maximum. And then what I'm going to do in Excel is have a random number generator that takes from a normal population. Shane, I don't know if you have any statistics background. You're muted.
You did, because the dogs were barking. Not to this extent. We'll
Okay.
say.
Yeah. So I guess basically the idea is that the 0.5 here is corresponding to a 50% likely outcome. So in this case, cost most likely. What is the most likely cost we think is associated with a particular challenge? So we're going to say that cost most likely is at the 50% probability. So if the random number generator comes up with a 0.5, Then we're going to scoot over along this curve and say, okay, this is the cost associated with 0.5. If the random number generator comes up with a number below 0.5, it's going to take a cost somewhere between the most likely and our minimum, or even, below our it's not our actual minimum. We're saying the minimum is close to minimum, but the sky can fall, and we're not projecting the sky falling. The worst case where we have a tsunami and a hurricane and hail all at once, or tornadoes or whatever. So
I think what we just want to be careful is just making sure whatever final product we use similar to this is easy for the layman to understand, right? For the people like myself that don't have the right background, because it's easy for you, from the
right.
and maybe you from a finance perspective looking at, but this to me looks like and it's not filled in, right? Obviously, so uber complicated, and we want to make sure that the average Joe is going to be able to read and understand what we're trying to accomplish. So I think we just need to keep that in mind, is that who the potential audience might be for something like this.
Absolutely. So once we have the random number generated and we come up with the corresponding costs according to this curve, we'll put them all over into these charts here on the right-hand side, where we have the number that got generated as well as the associated cost. And we'll do it like 10,000 times. We'll do it a lot of times. And at the end of it, by taking that column of costs, we'll have a cost distribution, where we'll be able to say, okay, all of our costs, when we ran the numbers, we can see that, when we have all of the challenges and all of our potential revenues running at the same time, the type of gaps that we come up with in terms of revenue budget gaps are, ranging from this big to this big to this big. Most of the time they're clustered right here. And that's kind of the goal that we're trying to get to. We're trying to understand where is our likely budget gap, and how far apart are the max and min numbers in that gap. That gives us a handle on what it is that we're trying to deal with. And that gives us confidence that if we come up with appropriate measures to take to deal with that gap, that we will indeed be able to deal with that gap as we move into our next couple of fiscally challenging years. So, I did this just in the half hour before our meeting, so I don't have more charts that do a better explanation, but is there anything that you want to comment or question on, Shana? Or Dan?
Just what I said is just making sure that the end result is readable and understandable. That we have it labeled and all that jazz as it comes to an end can be understood by someone with no background in what we're trying to show and accomplish.
Yeah, it's more just an explanation. I think we have to put with it definitely that, we have certain set costs, but there are variables too. So we're trying to run scenarios to make sure that, what we are projecting, which at the end has to be one number when we're setting a budget, makes sense. So
yeah, it'll be
really just testing
the number. So, I think probably the words saying, hey, we're doing modeling, and that is the goal that Dan just spoke to. That could be the part that's for the lay people, and then for the people who want to dig deeper and saying, okay, well, how did you do that? Right? Then we can, maybe have a little bit added detail, obviously trying to make it as clear as possible.
Fantastic. All right, thanks, Erica. Shana, I heard you were super busy researching new revenue opportunities.
Yeah, I just sent it to you. Did it come through to you?
Give me 1 second here.
Just because I know that I have difficulties sharing on my own in this for some reason.
I did get it. Let me just bring this up here.
In case I can report on what I did so far. I sent to Tom to look at so he can start working on his part. But I spent some time. I spent almost all of Monday. I was off from work, so my kid was at camp, so I started to dig into this. I didn't realize it was going to take me quite so long, but so I started trying to a little bit like mirror what the Hingham report did without with making sure I wasn't like plagiarizing exactly what they said, and come up with a similar kind of looking section where, and this is like the roughest of rough drafts. I don't think Tom's reviewed it yet either, but just like, this is what we've been researching. Here's a table, it's color coded in all kinds of places for me to figure out where I need to fill things in. But basically, here's the revenue sources like we looked at. What do we think the estimated revenue impact is going to be on a high, medium, low basis? What might be a process to initiate something, and then and our recommendation for the select board will be at the end. So everything that Tom and I are looking at is kind of like in this chart. And then below starts with like an explanatory that Tom and I are both filling in our parts, but what is an explanation of each particular item? So if you keep scrolling down, Dan, it'll start to break into each piece. So we've got a bunch of things we're looking at. But like, so then for each part, it'll say like, here's the description, this is what it is. This is what a process to implement might be. Some of them we have historical information. So some of them have like a history section, and then it'll have like a recommendation section. So like for this one, it's like, what is it? Well, towns might rent or lease own facilities, land, athletic fields. And then I found the school lease policy, so I've referenced that here. I've got a few more things. Actually, Dan, I talked with Kristen this morning, but I've got some stuff I wanted to chat with you about for this. So maybe if we have a few minutes at the end, we can do that.
Sure.
And then what would the process be? Well, like if we could increase rentals, great. So I've got to work on that. But basically, I kind of went through I got through most of mine, giving a general overview of what everything is and then what the capacity is. And then I've got more to do, but it's got a few pages worth of things that I started, like sale of real estate. So I need to just fill in how many properties that we have. Dan, I think I need your help with that.
I think Will just sent the list over. I haven't checked it out yet, but we're underway.
And then Tom has got the composting program. So it's basically kind of an outline. It's probably too much to look at all of it, but I started working, those two pieces are Tom. And then I started with the recreational marijuana, which is a larger section. So it is an overview of like the Massachusetts history and the ballot and the fact that Westford, historically, we've already voted it down, how many communities have adopted it. And then what I started looking at some of the revenue impact of the other towns and what they've been reporting in our surrounding area. I think the green for me is like my fact checking color. Like, I think that's what would need to happen. So we got to kind of talk through some of that as we get further, but I think that would be the process to implement. I added in this one, like an items for consideration piece, because I think this is a hot topic. So I reached out to Mark Chambers, the chief of police, to see if he had any information about increased crime rates. So I've got to update this, but he reported back to me that we haven't seen any increased crime rate, marijuana related crime in Westford. And then he reached out for me to, I think he emailed me back so far, Tingsboro and I think Littleton agreed to speak with me about so that I could reach out to both their chief of police to see if they've reported any increased crime since they've opened dispensaries in their towns, to just try to put in a little bit of information. Obviously, if anything in these lists, right, if the select board decided to pursue them, would require more in-depth research and whatever, but at least to give some bare bones information, to dot our T's, cross our I's. So I'll work.
Hey, Shanna?
Yeah.
I'm thinking if you are hoping to meet with some of these other towns, a big part of Westford's population, I think, would be concerned about youth. And so it might be interesting to know, I mean, given that cannabis is legal, you can't say that increased use is a crime concern, except for youth, right? So if you're talking to like the chief of police, are they seeing increased usage? Do they have any school resource officers who are seeing increased usage as a result of, you know, things in town, or, you know, just anything that addresses that? Because I see that as being a concern among parents in town, or
Yeah.
even others as well. It's not just parents, but.
Yeah, I can add that to the list. I think what we're looking for is like, is it part of it too? That is part of it. Yes, Erica, is I think some of the initial concern was that people would come into town to purchase there and that might cause increased crime. So I think it's a two-part kind of question. I had asked Dr. Chu about like the youth risk surveys that we did to see if there was, might be any information there. And he didn't think there was anything directly related that would speak to what you're talking about, Erica, but I can ask these other.
Well, there
chief
is.
of police too.
Well, I mean, there is actually. I mean, in the towns that didn't have dispensaries and then did have dispensaries that also filled out those youth risk behavior surveys.
Right. Yeah, Dr. Chu just said for the Westford piece of it, he didn't think there would be anything valuable there in
Right,
our
there wouldn't be. That's true, because we don't have any dispensaries, so you wouldn't be able to have it before and after. But if you're talking to these other towns, that might be a source, because there are questions in there regarding use.
Yep.
So that is a possible avenue, I think, to investigate regarding youth use.
And I think that we also need to consider like how in depth we need to get for the purpose of this exercise. Like certainly if the select board looked at a recommendation and said, yes, it seems like it might be a revenue source we want to provide, then there would probably need to be a separate task force or a separate study that would gain more information to figure out risk reward a little bit above and beyond what I think our task is in this particular item. But I thought that at least giving a high level, insight would be something that would at least maybe not, maybe prevent some of the immediate naysayer from looking at it right away and saying no. Like at least if we can give a baseline that we did a little bit of due diligence in the recommendation, especially because I think that in the scheme of things, this is probably one of the revenue sources that would have the higher dollar amount value for us. So doing a little bit of due diligence there. So all good points, Eric. I wrote all that stuff down. We'll see. The youth risk, I might have to go to superintendents for that. I don't know if the police will have that information, but at least I reached out to our chief of police and he said at least those two towns agreed to speak with me or to email with me. So
yeah, and then I recall when I was on school committee, I was able to get access to information without having to go through the superintendent, and I don't remember how, but it might be publicly available for those risky behavior surveys.
Yeah, maybe Val might know. I could check in with her.
Yeah, maybe check with Val. Yeah, she'd be a great person to ask. Because obviously it's harder to get time with superintendents, but I do think that if it's one of the higher revenue potential sources, then it's going to get more attention, and anything that we can find out, especially if it's concerned parents, if you get mama bears out there, it's their force, right? So you want to be able to, I think if we can find that information, it's a good idea. I don't think we're necessarily going to have the time to establish a whole new task force to look into the question of youth. I think our partner to do as much as
I think that if the select board determines, I think anything, this is the impression I got from Tom when I was speaking with him, is anything that any revenue source that we would consider would need to be looked at more closely by the select board, right? Before they start making their recommendations or start making any changes to bylaws, all that jazz. So I think that our report is going to present what we think we would recommend the select board to look into further, right? And so this one for sure would be a hot button item that would require more in-depth information before we presented it to the town. And I think I might add a little bit more in here, but I made sure to list all of the surrounding communities that have dispensaries. And so from a realistic perspective, we've got nearly probably 3/4 of the communities that touch us have a dispensary at the moment, right? So we're giving the revenue there. So I think Tom and I can talk a little bit more about how in depth we want to go there. So basically this is kind of the outline that I've done for most of the revenue sources so far. So I don't think we need to necessarily scroll through all of them, but that one I spent a little bit more time trying to get some more research on and digging into finding the budgets for some of the towns that have dispensaries and what they were projecting and things like that. So it's kind of what I've spent some time on. And so I've gotten through most of mine, at least with an initial pass through.
Shane, do we want to just touch high level just so they're recorded and on video
Sure.
that they're out
Sure.
there?
Absolutely. Great. So Tom has a pay-as-you-use trash fees. So short-term rentals I looked at is right now Westford bylaws don't allow for short-term rentals outside of Summer Village. So there's really not any, there's unlikely to be any revenue here. I was talking with Jeff from the planning board. Yep. And so he said that potentially I could check with Will and the assessor's office to see exactly how we're taxing Summer Village. Are we taxing them as short-term rentals? Are we not? Are they just paying are they doing any hotel tax, or just to get any idea whether there's any potential of revenue from Summer Village, if we would even want to go down that path, obviously. So I've got a follow-up item on that, but he's out of office.
He's back in today, so I'm sure I'll get back to you quickly.
And then the split tax rate is Tom. Meals tax, I've got to circle back to. I didn't get to that one. I ran out of time on Monday. Real estate transfer fees, Tom's going to look into that. The room occupancy fee, we are at the maximum 6% from what I could tell, allowable by the state. So there's no revenue potential there because we're already at the max we're allowed. Tom has cell phone tower rentals, school activity fee increases. I need to flesh out some more information from the dark communities. Dr. Chu is going to see what Jenny might already have for me. So I listed what the current fees are, and then I need to figure out the best way to research what our DART communities are doing. So I've got follow up on that. Same thing with the school bus transportation fees. So I've got just the information about the state law that requires busing. What is Westford charging right now? So I need to circle back. Again, I think he didn't know if he had readily available, but he said he was going to see if Jenny had some access to information besides me just kind of Googling around the web. Solar panel field rentals. There is a current, and maybe Dan knows about this too, but there's a current assessment that's happening right now by an outside consultant to figure out where we might be able to implement solar panels. So Tom said we should table this one for a few weeks while they finish that assessment. The naming bylaw fees, I talked with Kristen about this a little bit this morning. So I just got to put a write-up in that. And then Tom has these last few. I was thinking from an economic development perspective, and I got to talk with Tom about this, that maybe we should pull out the MBTA multifamily zoning requirement as a separate item, because that is a more immediate revenue potential source than just generic economic development, which could take time. If we, from my conversation with Jeff in the planning office was, we need to have something in place by 2024, but if we do something sooner, we might be able to generate revenue going into the 2025 fiscal year, because there are already developers that are already looking for who zones this pretty quickly, and they're kind of ready to move. So if we could get a zoning bylaw change for this in the March town meeting of 2023, this could actually become a pretty quick potential for revenue source. So I was thinking that, so I wanted to talk to Tom about that and to see if maybe we should just pull that out as a separate entity outside of just generalized economic development.
I think that's a great point. It's such its own thing coming forward with certain dates that I think we really need to consider this, and we want to spread word about for the annual town meeting too, so it garners support. So
Yes, that's exactly what I was looking at, because I got some more information after I talked to Tom when I was talking to Jeff Morissette in the planning department about it. And this
Yeah,
is
so
a more immediate action item.
Shannon, just making sure I'm following the bubble. You're talking about the multifamily zoning.
Multifamily zoning, yeah. So Tom and I just had economic development listed. And so Tom and I talked through this list at the end of last week before I started doing more research on a Monday. So as I reached out on Monday to Jeff Morissette in the planning office, and he called me right away, which was great. So we had a chance to talk through it a little bit. And the more we were talking about just some of the stuff in general, it seemed that this might belong as its own revenue stream. So that when we make a recommendation of things we want to immediately pursue, this is probably one, and it's something we have to do. But the sooner we do it, probably the better it is from a revenue perspective, because other towns seem like they're not moving as quickly on it. And so the early bird kind of catches the worm, it sounds like, in this one. So we might want to make this a higher priority recommendation if we determine that. So Jeff and I had talked about maybe circling back in a month or two. That committee that is focused on the MBTA is in their kind of early stages. They have like their first meeting next week or something. So they don't have a lot of data yet on terms of what potential projections could be based on how we change the zoning. So I think we'll have some more information in the current weeks, but they're needing to get in high gear to prepare material for March. So they're not quite on the same timeline as we are, but hopefully by the time we need to report this in October, they'll have at least a little bit of initial data that we could use here too.
No, that's great. Yeah. So are they aware that we would be hoping to get kind of cost range from them?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I talked with Jeff about. So I think their goals and our goals have some alignment here, right? Which is finding economic development revenue streams. And this seems to be one of the more immediate ones. And whether or not we have to do it anyway, right? We have no choice to do it. It's just how meaningful we are and how we accomplish it could have an impact on the revenue. And so
yeah, sorry, I misspoke. I think I said cost range, but we really want the revenue.
Yeah. Right. And so they've got to just look at all the different areas that could be zoned, and then look at recommendations of like, if we did this in this zone, this could be a possible revenue that growth, or if we didn't do this, in which places we want to do. And so I think they need to gather up a little bit more data, and hope they're not going to be as close to done as we'd like them to be, since we're targeting October and they're targeting March, but hopefully they'll have a little bit more as we get to like the end of the summer that we could use.
So I think with the MBTA, that's going to have more of an impact on FY26, because we only assess what's built in the ground as of June 30th. So, we probably won't see that impact right away. Nobody's going to be able to build anything in 3 months. So,
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it'll probably be 26, 27 where we really see some heavy gains.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been working on.
This is fantastic, Shanna. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for all your effort. That looks really, really great. I have a comment or a question. So I'd mentioned before that spreadsheet that we're hoping to kind of put all these numbers into, also has a column for comments regarding additional impacts that aren't necessarily financial. And I wonder if you might incorporate those into your sheet there. So for each revenue source, you also have possible other impacts, for consideration. So like, for the fees, we might have reduced participation from students, or for the pay as you throw, we might have reduced trash costs, but higher recycling costs, or for, obviously we just talked about pot, that might have potential increased youth use. So, I mean, just things that we want to report on and say that we considered. And so it's not not all decisions are just financial, right? So capturing that, I think in your lovely, your workbook there would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think I want to just think we just got to be careful of kind of towing that line a little bit, of making sure that in our report at the end of the day, it's like, this is a high level overview, right? Because we don't have the time. Like we can list off a few things that come off like top of mind, but we're not going to have the time to really like dig into all of the different negative, positive impacts of everything, right? Because we've got 5 months to finish this, not even. So I think we just want to be cautious in the way that we present the findings. However, we're wording the document as a whole, right? And it's not just this portion, but our entire document that we,
And we appropriately
more, yeah, in a way more verbose way, say like, we did the best we could under the time constraints that we had, and that everything here is, it's not a deep dive in a lot of places. It's a high level overview, right, of what we could accomplish during the time frame. So I think that that's just for the document as a whole an important piece, because what I don't want, Erica, is us to put something in there and then people are like, but you didn't this and you didn't that and you didn't this and you didn't that, and it's like, well,
I get that no matter what we do, I think, I mean, because the whole point is for them to use their taxpayer dollars. So I think we're going to get some scrutiny no matter what. But I agree with couching it and saying, hey, look, this is something that we thought of and we're putting it out here. Here's a draft. Please comment if you think of other things we should have in this paragraph that talks about possible other impacts, then let us know and we'll put those in too, right? I mean, it's really just to try to give the three boards that we're going to in the end kind of a big picture, right? And I think having that category, if you're willing to put it into your document, would be helpful in trying to make it a well-rounded picture.
Yeah, I'll definitely add that in.
Yeah, great.
So I don't know if you had anything else on the agenda, Dan, or if we can take, we had till 2:00, right, for this?
Yeah, we have till 2:00. So if you want to ask questions, that's great. I think that's good use of
one,
time.
so I apologize. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I had a few things that I uncovered that I think may come to you, Dan, for questions.
Sure.
So it sounds like you talked to Kristen already, so you know that I'm looking for a property list. And she said, versus me going into the GIS and trying to search, that you might be able to help me get one of those.
Yes, I can. Will actually already emailed me something, so let me see if this is in the
Yeah,
form
so
that we can actually.
I mean, mostly I think, and you can direct me to him. I guess I got to talk to him anyway about other stuff, but was what is the total amount of properties we own, but then maybe trying to get an understanding of what would be viable properties, right? That are something that could be better developed or could be taxable if we did something with them.
Yeah, so I can tell you right away, he sent a list of 330 properties. So it's probably gonna entail a discussion with Will to kind of go through what these are. And yeah, a lot of it's just land, not buildings. So yeah.
Well, and this question, is it buildable land? Are there restrictions on them that would make it, is there land that's viable? So certainly if you want to just connect him to me, I mean, he's already connected to me on Jeff Morissette's email too.
Okay.
I feel like I've already bothered everybody that works in the town of Westford already.
I'm sure we'll be happy to help.
Okay.
So
it's like Kristen, out to the planning board, out to the chief of police. I'm like, la-di-da, like keyboarding, like, hi. All right, so that one. And then she said that you could just give me a quick overview of like, if we sell property, we have to use the money in a certain way.
Right.
So that maybe explain that.
So we just kind of went through this with 63 Main Street, where we bought the house that burned down for everybody watching at a town meeting. I want to say 4 years ago.
I think.
What year?
More. It was more than that.
It was definitely a couple of years pre-COVID. So maybe what year did you say, Shanna?
2018.
18. Okay, so 4+ years ago. So that was October. Where we went and we released an RFP to sell the property with restrictions on it to keep it a single family household and everything else, which was the direction from town meeting. So when we sold that, we took the proceeds and we put it into a separate account. Normally when you sell like a vehicle or anything like that, basically it's one-time revenue, it goes to free cash, recertify it, and it goes back out and town meeting can reappropriate that. With buildings and property, they want that to go in a separate account because they don't want spent to balance the operating budget. They want spent on another one-time item. So what we did in March was we reappropriated the proceeds we got, 400 some odd thousand, top of my head, and put it towards the town hall parking lot, which we were trying to expand in back of the property. We thought it was a good match. So we used those proceeds for that project.
So it needs to go into a special account for single use.
Yeah. So we can't sell off our land and balance the budget with that since it's one time.
Would it be like an accurate overview to say that it goes into a special account for single use items, cannot be used for balancing the budget?
Yes, that's
Not be put into
100% true. Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. I've got that written down. And then what else did I have for you? So do you, and this is I think this is a loaded topic. And maybe Kristen already told you we were talking about it, but she was sending me some information on our leases, right?
Yeah.
So we leased Road and Bush, Frost, and Old Nab for what sounds like some obscenely minimal amount of money per year. Do we require or have a place to check like their finances? Like what stood out to me when I was, and Eric, I guess I can rephrase you because I think Dan and Kristen already talked, but I was talking with Kristen this morning about just our leases and where we might have some more opportunity for revenue generation. And so the primary leases that we have, like bigger leases, are Road and Bush, Frost, and Old Nab that all go to the Road and Bush nonprofit organization. And therefore, what appears to be a very minimal amount of money. And to me, my first thought was, I mean, I looked at daycare right there, and they charge regular premium daycare prices that a profit type organization would be charging. So, and if they're not paying a considerable amount of rent on the buildings, where is all that money going? Do we know for sure? Do we have some insight into the fact that we're giving them the property at a very reduced rate? What are their operating costs? And is there room for us to potentially be charging, or should we be charging more money for the property? And so I don't know if you have any insight into that, Dan, or do they have to report their findings, or is there a place that I can search for some of their?
So I don't think their financials are public information. So you could ask, but I don't know. I don't think they could be forced to hand those over. Yeah. We did give them some rent relief during COVID when they were shut down, and basically they were not doing well at the time. So they did share some financial information with us at that time that they did not want to make public in the packets and whatnot. But that wasn't a true representation of how they typically operate anyways. So, and
it just seems to me like if they, let's say, like I've seen that you can rent the gym, right, for a birthday party.
Yeah.
Where does that revenue go? I'm assuming that goes back to Road and Bush, not to us, even though it's our property. So is there, and I say it's a hot button issue because obviously Road and Bush is valuable to the community and there are a lot of programs that are running there, but is there, or as a town, are we selling ourselves short with the agreement that we have with them? I think that's something we probably need to look into or recommend potentially, even if it's not us looking into it. So I don't know if anyone has done that yet, because I can't be the first person to ask the question.
No, no. So
it's an interesting question. I think if we are giving them that access with absolutely no insight into their finances, that does seem a little weird. I would think that at least the town would have some insight, right? I mean,
during negotiations we did. So we did negotiate a 5-year lease from FY21 to FY25. So that lease is expiring pretty soon, actually. Less than 2 years at this point. So yes, we did talk about it back then. We did have a subsequent negotiation after the 65 Main was built, and then Recreation occupied the third floor. So we sort of prorated the rent at that point. But yeah, it's definitely something that was discussed. I remember this was a very hot topic issue when we brought the plans to basically fix the building, 65 Main Street, at town meeting, and people were very concerned what's going to happen with TRCCI. So they didn't want to they were nervous about allocating the funds and having them move out of those offices during the construction period. So it is a sensitive topic townwide.
I get it. I mean, this is even less. Also, yeah. So I mean, looking at this is a public document. Is that correct, Dan?
Which one?
The lease.
Yes. Yep.
So I can discuss that. Okay, I just didn't want to.
Sure.
I mean, looks like we're charging them for this fiscal year $50,000.
In base, so all told, I think it's like 84 when you add up all the rent and other. But I think base is around there. Yeah.
I mean, for three gigantic, well, not all three are gigantic buildings, but for some pretty sizable amount of space. And I totally get it's a hot button issue, but we need, I mean, from an objective perspective, it's our role here, right, to look at these things in an objective way. And it's like, do you want to charge a little bit more to Road and Bush, or do we want to cut $500,000 from the budget, the school budget, right? As a town, we need to think broader, right? And not just look at everything as one individualized issue. If you don't do something in one area, then you're going to have to do it in another area. So where do we want?
Would we lose Road and Bush? I mean, we don't know. So I guess I hadn't realized that we actually are charging them rent. So the question is, are we in line with other sizable facilities that charge rent in the area? Maybe we are. And maybe, I mean, that's still a fair amount of money for a nonprofit to deal out, and they still have, you know, I assume that they deal with some of the maintenance and utilities, and obviously they have to pay their teachers and their, you know,
they're not offering daycare services at a reduced cost, right? When you look at that kind of, I mean, they're.
I agree. I guess I just wonder if are there, because they are renting from us, are their expenses actually less than other daycare centers? I don't know where we stand in terms of our rent number compared to Chelmsford, for instance, right? I don't know. Yeah. I mean, not necessarily the town renting to their daycare centers, but anyone, the rental space.
Mortgage or rental, yeah, on a property.
I don't know where we stand. We might be quite in line with other opportunities for daycare centers to rent.
I'm not sure it's something that we're going to be able to peel back all the layers on in this task force assignment, but I think it's about planting those seeds, right? Maybe this is something else we need to consider, you know, and maybe recommend for more research. Who knows? You know, maybe, and after that, it's out of our hands, right? The select board. But is there something else that could be done with the property that would be more profitable to the town, that would still contribute community services, right? You know, just because Road and Bush isn't there doesn't mean that some of the same gymnastic classes, who knows, needs to change. We don't know the answer to that, and we can't figure that out in the next 4 months. But it certainly seems to be a place that just opens my eyeball to say, there's these 3 buildings, we're only getting $50,000 a year rent out of them. We're not paying, they're not taxed, right? Because they're town-owned buildings. So we're getting no tax income on them.
Right.
Right. So it's kind of a double whammy, right? So if we're only getting $50,000, what would the potential tax income be if those were commercial buildings, right? That were owned by somebody else other than the town? Because they're losing
84,000, right? 84,000, Dan? Is that right? 84,000 income.
For 24, I think, yeah. So that income too, when we collect the rent checks, it goes into a revolving account that's authorized by a select board to be spent back on those buildings to maintain them. So we're basically operating those at no cost to us besides the huge upgrade we did for the road and bush, which is mostly community preservation funds, and 10% of that was from the general fund. So, but the day-to-day maintenance is supposed to be covered by TRCCI in those buildings, and all utilities and everything like that. So,
Okay.
but it definitely belongs on the list, Shayna. So for consideration,
somewhere there
Yeah,
for
yeah.
someone to look at.
I don't have the answer for you, but it should go on the list.
I'm just checking off some real hot button items on my
Yep.
list. Really start fueling the
That's fine.
conversation around the households of Westford. I got a list of things that are hot topics. But I think those were primary what I was trying to figure out from you, Dan. Not that I don't reserve the right to circle back to you, but
Of course.
those are the things that came up. So I think that's all I had.
Okay, we're almost at 2:00 here. Erica, do you have anything else for today, or
I didn't.
should we meet again next Wednesday, same time?
Is there going to also be I think we also have a meeting for the broader group, right?
With Chris, yeah, I'll touch base with her just to make sure, but we can set that up so we can meet beforehand and join together after. Probably makes sense since we have the public forum come out quickly. Okay, that sounds good. And why don't we hold off on the minutes, because we only have 3 of us here till next time. We'll get all those organized. That's all right.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's true. We should have minutes. How should we go about the minutes?
So Jeremy's been taking minutes, so this is recorded so he can write some notes on this recording.
Okay, so he'll just go from the recording.
Yep.
Perfect.
And I'll help him fill in where necessary.
Okay.
All right. So
Sounds
Shane, I'll
good.
put you in touch with Will too.
Yes, thank you. I
Okay. Fantastic. All right. Is there anything else?
think that's it.
Thank you, guys.
Motion to adjourn? Anybody?
Motion. Again.
Dana? Erica? Okay. I guess we have to do a roll call. So Erica,
Yeah.
Shayna,
Yep.
Em, and I. Okay. I will see you all later. We're adjourned.
Rest of the
right.
week.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.